What if everything you thought you knew about the moon was a lie? What if it wasn't a barren rock, but a base of operations for something else? In the 1970s, at the height of the Cold War, the CIA recruited a man named Ingo Swann, not for his strength, but for his mind. He was their top psychic spy. His mission, to use the power of remote viewing to see places no satellite could go. He proved his ability by accurately describing a ring around Jupiter years before science found it. But his next assignment was different. He was given coordinates not on this Earth, but on the moon. And what he described there, structures, lights, and beings that were aware of him, was so terrifying, so world-shattering, that the government buried it for decades. This is the true story of the Stargate Project. Ingo Swann's journey into the realm of the unknown began with a bold claim in his 1998 book, Penetration. In its pages, Swann, an artist, psychic, and self-described explorer of consciousness, recounted how he was allegedly recruited by intelligence agencies, asked to remote view extraterrestrial activity, and even glimpse the hidden side of the moon where alien bases might exist. To many readers, this sounded like pure science fiction, a strange blend of spy thriller, paranormal memoir, and cosmic revelation. Yet his claims did not exist in a vacuum. In 2006, the CIA declassified thousands of pages of documents, revealing that Swann really had been part of the Stargate Project, a decades-long program exploring whether psychic phenomena like telepathy, precognition, and remote viewing could be harnessed for intelligence purposes. Suddenly, the man once dismissed as a fringe crank looked very different. Perhaps eccentric, yes, but also a central figure in one of the strangest intersections of government secrecy and human consciousness research ever attempted. And in his stories of alien activity on the moon, Swann left behind a mystery that still unsettles and fascinates truth seekers to this day. This video will take you on a journey through Swann's life, his psychic discoveries, his government work, his claims of extraterrestrial contact, and the enduring questions he left us with. The early years of Ingo Swann. Childhood in Colorado. Ingo Douglas Swann was born on September 14, 1933, in the small mining town of Telluride, Colorado. The landscape of his youth was dramatic, towering mountains, clear skies, and the kind of quiet isolation that can make a child feel both small in the face of nature and deeply attuned to its rhythms. From a young age, Swann displayed what his family considered a sensitive temperament. He was highly observant, easily affected by changes in mood or environment, and prone to vivid dreams. In a world where such traits were often overlooked or dismissed, his family quietly nurtured this sensitivity. Looking back, Swann often suggested that his childhood primed him for the psychic life ahead. He recalled early episodes of intuition, moments where he seemed to just know things before they happened. Sometimes these were small, anticipating who was about to knock at the door. Other times, they were more unsettling, dreams that eerily mirrored real-life events. The budding artist. Though remembered primarily for his psychic work, Swann was first and foremost an artist. He studied at the University of Colorado, graduating with a degree in biology, but he quickly gravitated toward New York City's art scene in the 1950s and 60s. There, he painted, exhibited, and mingled with avant-garde circles. Art, for Swann, was not merely about color and canvas, it was a spiritual practice, a way of seeing beyond surfaces into underlying patterns. His paintings often combined abstract forms with symbolic depth, hinting at the otherworldly perceptions he would later describe in his psychic experiments. The artist's eye and the psychic's gaze, it turned out, were not so different. Both required a sensitivity to hidden realities. Both demanded trust in impressions that arrive before logical explanation. Discovering psychic abilities. Experiments with ESP. By the late 1960s, parapsychology, the scientific study of psychic phenomena, was gaining traction. Universities and research institutes were running experiments on extrasensory perception, ESP, telekinesis, and altered states of consciousness. Swann, curious and open-minded, began volunteering for such studies. He quickly made an impression. In controlled laboratory conditions, Swann demonstrated unusual abilities. In one famous test with the American Society for Psychical Research, he identified a burnt-out light bulb sealed inside a box. Researchers were stunned, not just by his accuracy, but by the confidence and calm with which he described impressions others could not detect. A reputation grows. Word of Swann's talents spread, and soon he was a sought-after test subject. Unlike many psychics who relied on performance, Swann approached his abilities methodically, even skeptically. He wanted proof, repeatability, and scientific validation. This scientific attitude made him attractive to researchers at the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, in Menlo Park, California, where physicists Dr. Harold Puthoff and Dr. Russell Targ were quietly running groundbreaking experiments. Breakthroughs in remote viewing. Defining remote viewing. At SRI, Swann helped refine the practice of remote viewing, a structured method for perceiving distant or unseen locations using only the mind. Unlike vague psychic impressions, remote viewing followed protocols. Coordinates were given, impressions were recorded, sessions were blind and controlled. Swann thrived in this environment. He wasn't asked to entertain or mystify, he was asked to observe. And what he observed stunned even hardened scientists. The Jupiter experiment. In 1973, Swann was given a peculiar assignment: remote view the planet Jupiter. NASA's Pioneer 10 probe was en route, so his observations could later be tested against hard data. Swann described Jupiter's turbulent atmosphere, colorful bands, storms, and high winds. Most remarkably, he mentioned a faint ring surrounding the planet. At the time, no such ring was known to exist, but in 1979, Voyager 1 confirmed that Jupiter indeed had a thin ring system, validating Swann's claim 6 years after he made it. This success marked a turning point. Swann was no longer just a subject in parapsychological experiments. He was a pioneer of a new form of psychic exploration, one with real-world corroboration. Government involvement, the Stargate Project. Why the CIA cared? The Cold War was an era of strange research. Both the US and Soviet Union were desperate to outmaneuver each other, and no frontier seemed too bizarre to explore. Psychic phenomena, though controversial, could not be ignored if there was even a slim chance it could yield intelligence advantages. The CIA, DIA, and Army all dabbled in psychic research, but it was at SRI where the Stargate Project formally took shape. Swann became one of its key figures. The secrecy of it all. Swann later recalled being summoned under mysterious circumstances in 1975, escorted by military personnel to secure facilities. He was told bluntly, the government wanted his abilities and secrecy was paramount. The protocols he helped develop would train other remote viewers, some of whom went on to produce intelligence reports used in real military operations. Though skeptics debate the ultimate effectiveness of the program, declassified documents show that remote viewing was taken seriously at the highest levels for over 2 decades. Remote viewing the moon. The mysterious assignment. Among Swann's strangest assignments was one he described in Penetration, to remote view the moon. He was given coordinates, not explanations. What he reported shook him. Structures and machinery. At some lunar sites, he saw nothing unusual, but at others, he described structures, towers, domes, geometric shapes that suggested intelligent construction. He claimed to see roads or tracks carved into the dust, as if heavy machinery had moved across the surface. In one case, he saw a crater glowing with a greenish haze, as though illuminated from within, an impossible phenomenon on an airless world. Beings on the moon. Most startling of all, Swann claimed he perceived beings, humanoid in shape but distinctly non-human. They appeared to be engaged in construction or mining activities. He described them as aware, technologically advanced, and not particularly pleased to be observed. In fact, Swann said he felt detected, as though his act of remote viewing was noticed, and the beings looked back at him. The idea was terrifying. Not only were aliens present, but they might know when we were watching. The book Penetration. When Penetration was published in 1998, it was met with skepticism, fascination, and in some circles, quiet alarm. Swann did not simply recount psychic experiments. He wove a narrative suggesting that extraterrestrial presence was known, if not by the public, then by certain factions of intelligence agencies. He described strange encounters with mysterious individuals, secret briefings, and the unsettling notion that humanity was already entangled with forces far beyond our comprehension. Legacy and controversy, skeptics and believers. To skeptics, Swann's claims about aliens on the moon remain unprovable anecdotes. They point out that remote viewing, while intriguing, has never been consistently validated in mainstream science. But to believers, Swann's work represents a profound breakthrough, evidence that consciousness itself can transcend time and space, and that humanity may already be brushing against cosmic neighbors. Contributions to consciousness research. Regardless of where one stands, Swann's impact is undeniable. He helped establish remote viewing as a repeatable methodology. He challenged scientific assumptions about the limits of perception. He inspired generations of psychics, seekers, and researchers to push beyond the materialist worldview, a human story at its core. What makes Ingo Swann's journey so compelling is not only the strangeness of his claims, but the humanity behind them. He was not a guru or prophet, but an artist searching for truth. He doubted himself, wrestled with secrecy, and longed to make sense of experiences that defied logic. His story reminds us of something universal, that reality is larger than we think, that mystery endures, and that the line between imagination and discovery is thinner than we often admit. Final reflections. Ingo Swann died in 2013, leaving behind art, books, and a legacy of curiosity. Whether one sees him as a visionary, a mystic, a misunderstood genius, or simply a man who spun remarkable tales, his work continues to spark questions. What if consciousness truly extends beyond the body? What if the moon is not lifeless but inhabited? What if governments know far more than they admit? The answers remain elusive. But as Swann himself might say, the journey into the unknown is less about certainty and more about exploration. And in that sense, his life's work was not only about remote viewing planets or aliens, it was about expanding the boundaries of what it means to be human. More from Penetration and Swann's own words. Below are some of Swann's more striking passages, sketches of dialogue and internal experience as presented in Penetration, along with longer reflections and quotes. These help to humanize his journey and provide direct windows into what Swann claimed to perceive and feel, on interpretation, symbolism, and the limits of language. One of the key themes Swann returns to is that when doing remote viewing, or psychic observation, what one sees or senses is always filtered through memory, symbolic associations, one's prior knowledge, and subconscious constructs. He often warns, do not assume your impression is objective. Do not assume you have complete accuracy. Rather, one must constantly compare, test, and refine one's perceptions. Quote, "The psychic subject in remote viewing a site with an atomic reactor may well overlay the impressions with a teapot or a furnace, because these are the memory images which come closest to what is being psychically sensed. If you take the time to let the viewer study diagrams of atomic reactors and photographs of them and their surroundings, the next time they encounter one in psychic seeing, they are more likely to identify it correctly rather than call it a teapot." This is Swann reflecting on how symbolic metaphors or familiar shapes can slip into remote viewing when one lacks direct familiarity. Another powerful reflection. People fill in the unknown with what fits with their known. Swann repeatedly emphasizes that in psychic perception, there's always a danger. The viewer's subconscious fills gaps, projects interpretations. This doesn't mean all is false. It just means that discernment and cross-checking, external data corroboration, are crucial. On observations of the moon, alien objects, and cigar-shaped UFOs. These are some of the more dramatic claims Swann makes, often in Penetration, that pertain to non-earthly or moon phenomena. Some are photographic claims, some remote viewing claims, some anecdotal. Photo claims related to NASA missions, cigar-shaped objects near the moon's surface. Swann refers to certain NASA photos, such as Apollo 11 and Apollo 16, in which he states a luminous cylindrical-shaped object, or cigar-shaped object, is visible, sometimes casting a shadow. For example, one quote from Penetration describes, "In July 1969, its camera, Apollo 11, inadvertently captured a really neat and clear photo of a glowing cigar-shaped object close to the lunar surface. Since the photo reveals a vapor trail, the craft must have been traveling somewhat within the lunar atmosphere. He also writes, in July 1972, the Hasselblad camera of Apollo 16 recorded yet another cigar-shaped object. This object was quite large. It seems to have been somewhat glowing white, ionizing the atmosphere directly next to it, but was close enough to the lunar surface to cast its equally elongated shadow. Note: Swann attributes meaning to photographic anomalies. Critics argue about photo interpretation, whether there are artifacts, lens flares, or misinterpreted shadows. On seeing lights near craters, Swann claims that during his investigations, there were numerous reddish glowing spots shining out from Plato, a lunar crater, in 1966, moving down crater walls. On Secret Dialogue, Government Agents, Mr. Axelrod, Warning, and Psychic Danger. Penetration also includes narrative that reads more like a spy memoir: agents, warnings, tension, peril. Dialogue with Axelrod. In several passages, Swann recounts being briefed by a man named Mr. Axelrod, who seems to represent the interests of whatever agency has commissioned these remote viewing tasks. There is often strain, secrecy, and implicit danger. One passage, as quoted on Bookmate, for example, involves Swann's frustration and fear. I can't believe this. Unless they somehow have told you to stay away and somehow shown you they mean it. God damn it. They've somehow got you by the balls, haven't they? That's why you are resorting to psychic perceptions. Jaesis Kaharist. They are not friendly, are they? Are they, Axel? In this, Swann is almost panicked. He senses that the other side, the beings on the moon or extraterrestrial entities, are aware of his remote viewing and possibly hostile. On the reason for selecting Swann for certain tasks. Another passage. It was my idea to find a psychic who did not know anything about the moon and see what might be seen there, sort of an independent source of information which would lean our interpretations one way or another. Here, Swann is being asked to act as an independent observer, someone not already contaminated by existing lunar lore or photographic data, so that his impressions might serve as a benchmark or cross-check. What declassified documents add, what can be corroborated. The CIA and other agencies eventually released a number of documents related to the Stargate Project, some of which mention or involve Swann. From these, one can see both corroboration of Swann's involvement and some of the structure and internal assessments of what remote viewing could and could not achieve. Swann's role and remote viewing results. The CIA's FOIA-released documents show that Swann was indeed engaged with the SRI, Stanford Research Institute, and the Stargate Project in remote viewing tasks. One document, NSA RDP-96X0079 or R0001, 300008-7, has the header Cryptologic Aspects of ESP, and mentions that Swann and other remote viewers were able to describe distant rooms or targets never before observed. Though many details are blurred or vague, the document shows that some of their descriptions were judged accurate relative to control baselines. Also, in CIA RDP 960078 R03004 0014, Swann is quoted, and there are drawings in the document which include his subject responses in early paragraphs when attempting to remote view certain targets. These show how the subjects responded in terms of sensory impressions, geometric shapes, etc., limits, criticism, and internal assessments. From declassified material and later evaluations, a few patterns emerge. While some sessions produced striking hits, i.e. descriptions that appeared to match satellite imagery or physical reality, many sessions did not. Sometimes data was too vague or ambiguous. This is always a challenge when interpreting psychic impressions. The projects ran over decades. Partially, they continued because of both internal belief in the possibilities and external fears. I.e., what if the Soviets have this? But toward the end, one major reason for scaling back or closing was cost-benefit. Technological solutions, satellite imaging, remote sensing, etc., are more reliable, more reproducible, and less prone to subjective interpretation. Some external reviews, once documents were declassified, questioned methodology, how controls were handled, how hits were verified, whether confirmation bias played a role, etc. There is no consensus in peer-reviewed mainstream science that remote viewing works reliably. That said, some statistical anomalies are noted, but with caveats. Deeper reflections and inner experience. To really deepen the narrative, these are some of the more internal, psychological, almost existential aspects of Swann's account. These go beyond what he claimed to see and into how he felt, what it cost him, and how his perceptions changed over time. Strangeness, isolation, and solitude. Swann often remarks on how one must accept loneliness when having experiences that others can't verify, or even when others dismiss you. Being a remote viewer, especially one making bold claims about extraterrestrials on the moon, comes with a kind of burden. You see things, you suspect things, but you seldom have definitive proof in public. Quote, "To know what you want to share with the world because something has been transmitted to you is to know loneliness and real solitude, because no one else can share it." Here, Swann reflects on the inner challenge, not just psychic and observational, but emotional. His work seems to have required balancing openness to weird, disquieting impressions, and skepticism, questioning one's own perceptions. Psychic danger, psychic detection, and awareness. Several passages suggest Swann believed there are real risks in doing remote viewing, especially when perceiving beings or intelligence beyond Earth. He felt that being noticed telepathically, being looked at by beings, even possibly being in danger, were part of his experience. In one of his narratives, he writes that during a moon mission, he sensed the beings saw him. In others, like his conversation with Axelrod, there is anxiety. "They are not friendly, are they?" is asked. Swann implies that these extraterrestrial intelligences may not welcome being observed. The tension between secrecy and revelation. Swann's story involves secrecy at multiple levels: secret government projects, clandestine briefings, people who cannot or will not speak. At the same time, Swann seems driven to reveal what he has seen because he believes the implications are too big to stay hidden. For example, when asked to remote view the moon without prior knowledge, Swann writes, "It was my idea to find a psychic who did not know anything about the moon and see what might be seen there. Sort of an independent source of information, which would lean our interpretations one way or another." This indicates Swann's awareness of bias and his attempt to act as something like an experimental device, blinded as much as possible to get at fresh impressions, integrating the quotes and documents into the broader narrative. Putting together Swann's own accounts, plus what the declassified documents show, plus what his more philosophical reflections are, we can enrich the earlier narrative. Here are some synthesized expansions. Re-examining the moon missions with Swann's direct voice. When Swann describes being asked by Mr. Axelrod to view lunar coordinates, a lot of the narrative tension is hidden in unspoken assumptions, that someone powerful wants something hidden, that the moon may hold more than barren rock. Swann's statements suggest the psychic mission was not just about mapping the unknown, but about scrutiny, seeing what is being hidden. The passages where he confronts Axelrod, "They've somehow got you by the balls, haven't they? That's why you are resorting to psychic perceptions. They are not friendly, are they? Are they, Axel?" This is vivid. Swann is almost accusing Axelrod, or the secret agency, of being under pressure from extraterrestrial or hidden powers. It's like Swann's psychic mission is part of a larger counter-surveillance. He is seeing, but also possibly being seen. The role of photographs, anomalies, and cross-checking. Swann doesn't present remote viewing alone. He tries to anchor it in photographic or satellite evidence. His references to Apollo photos, such as the Apollo 11, Apollo 16 cigar-shaped objects, aren't casual. They are meant to show that the strange claims are not isolated to psychic vision. They intersect, in his view, with images that NASA has taken. This cross-referencing is central to Swann's method. Remote viewing gives impressions, then one searches for photographic or physical verification. Ambiguities are accepted, but more confidence is achieved if multiple independent lines of evidence match. The psychological weight and ethical implications. From what can be gathered, Swann believed there was a kind of cosmic politics, ET intelligences, bioandroids, hidden agents, psychic detection, possibly suppression of psychic people on Earth. He seems to have felt that Earth psychics, or remote viewers, are viewed as threats by these non-human intelligences. At the same time, he worried about public reaction, secrecy, and whether governments would or should share what was observed. The ethical weight is heavy. If his claims are even partly accurate, what does that mean for human knowledge? Oversight, responsibility, and belief. Uncertainties, contested points, and what remains unverified. To be honest, a well-rounded discussion must also point out what is not confirmable, what remains speculative, and where people disagree. These are not to discredit Swann, but to place his account fairly in the zone between claim and proof. The photographic claims, some of the images Swann refers to, e.g. alleged cigar-shaped objects, are disputed. Critics suggest many are misinterpretations, artifacts, or visual illusions. Replication and independent confirmation are sparse. Remote viewing's reliability. The CIA documents show both successes and failures. Some sessions have hits, others do not. The methodology is sometimes opaque, especially in older documents. The criteria for what counts as a hit are often broad or retrospectively matched. Alien beings on the moon or their nature. The descriptions of humanoid or non-human beings, construction, bases, etc. come from Swann's remote viewing sessions and subjective impressions. There is no openly published, fully verifiable physical evidence, e.g. clean, unambiguous photographs, returned samples, or independent third-party confirmation that is universally accepted. Psychic detection and telepathic encounter. The idea that extraterrestrial beings detect remote viewings or telepathically respond is vivid, but sits more in the realm of anecdote and psychic narrative than empirical science. Why Swann's story still matters, impacts, and ongoing questions. Deepening with these quotes and documents, we can see Swann's legacy isn't just about the curious claims, it's about what they force us to ask, both about consciousness and about what is hidden in the universe, and possibly hidden by us. Limits of perception. Swann's emphasis that we interpret through what we know, that psychic viewing is always mixed with memory and symbolism, calls attention to how all human observation works. Even science interprets data via theory, memory, prior knowledge. So Swann's work, even if not fully accepted, underscores the importance of humility in all attempts to see beyond our current frameworks. Consciousness beyond the brain. The idea that mind might reach beyond sensory boundaries, or that consciousness has capabilities not yet recognized in mainstream science, is embedded in Swann's claims and in the documents. Whether or not one believes all of his conclusions, his work helps push forward research interest in consciousness studies. Secrecy and power, the recurring theme of agencies, shadowy figures, Axelrod, suppressed information, warning, possible alien discomfort with human observation. These highlight how knowledge, especially of the anomalous, can be politically charged. What is made public, what is hidden, and who gets to decide become important questions. Cosmology and human significance. If even part of Swann's claims are true, that alien bases or beings are present on the moon or elsewhere, it would force a rethinking of humanity's place in the cosmos. Are we alone? Is the universe full of entities aware of us? And if they are, what are the ethical, scientific, existential implications? Conclusion: the unresolved enigma of consciousness and cosmos. Ingo Swann's journey from the isolated mountains of Colorado to the clandestine meeting rooms of intelligence agencies and the far reaches of psychic space represents one of the most compelling and unresolved enigmas of the 20th century. His story is not a simple narrative to be accepted or dismissed. It is a complex tapestry woven from threads of proven fact, extraordinary claim, profound introspection, and enduring mystery. To conclude his saga is not to arrive at a definitive answer, but to stand at the edge of a vast frontier, contemplating the profound questions his life forces us to ask about the nature of reality, consciousness, and our place in the cosmos. The verified facts of Swann's life provide an undeniable foundation for the strangeness that followed. His central role in the CIA and DIA's Stargate Project is no longer conjecture. It is a matter of public record, cemented by thousands of declassified documents. These papers confirm that for decades, the highest echelons of the US government took his abilities seriously enough to invest millions of dollars and countless hours of research. The success of the Jupiter remote viewing, later validated by the Voyager probe, stands as a towering anomaly that conventional science has yet to adequately explain. This factual bedrock forces us to acknowledge that Swann was far more than a mere fantasist. He was a pioneer in a legitimate, albeit highly controversial, field of state-sponsored research. It is upon this foundation of fact that Swann constructed his more astounding claims in Penetration. His accounts of remote viewing the moon, perceiving non-human intelligences, and his tense interactions with cryptic figures like Mr. Axelrod exist in a liminal space between classified truth and unverifiable testimony. The power of these claims lies not in their empirical provability, for they remain, by their very nature, deeply personal and subjective, but in their internal consistency and the profound psychological weight with which Swann delivered them. He did not present himself as an infallible oracle, but as a confused and often frightened human being, grappling with perceptions that shattered his understanding of reality. His insistence on the symbolic and interpretative nature of psychic data, his warnings about the subconscious filling in the blanks, reveal a man striving for a methodology amidst the madness, attempting to apply an artist's discernment to the raw, often terrifying, data of non-local perception. This intersection of the objective and subjective is where Swann's true legacy resides. He stands as a permanent challenge to the rigid materialist paradigm that dominates modern science. His work suggests that consciousness might not be a mere byproduct of the brain, locked within the skull, but a fundamental field of potentiality that can, under certain conditions, access information across vast distances of space and time, whether one views remote viewing as a yet-to-be-understood quantum phenomenon, a trick of the subconscious, or something truly paranormal. Swann's documented successes demand that we expand our models of human potential. He forces the question, if consciousness can indeed penetrate the veil of conventional reality, what else might be possible? What other layers of existence remain hidden from our ordinary senses? Furthermore, Swann's narrative thrusts us into the heart of a profound cosmological and existential dilemma. His claims of structures and beings on the moon, coupled with his fear of being psychically detected by a non-human intelligence, paint a picture of a universe that is far from empty and silent. It suggests a cosmos that may be teeming with life, much of which may be aware of us, even if we are largely unaware of it. This notion that we are not the sole actors on the cosmic stage carries immense implications. It recasts human history, theology, and science fiction not as mere speculation, but as potential reflections of a hidden truth. The ethical and political dimensions of this are staggering. If such presences are real, who knows about them? Why is this knowledge secret? And what might be the relationship between these intelligences and humanity? Ultimately, the story of Ingo Swann is a human story. It is the story of an artist, a seeker, who found himself at the nexus of unimaginable secrets. His journey is a metaphor for the human condition itself, a fragile consciousness adrift in a vast, mysterious universe, striving to see beyond the obvious, to understand the hidden patterns, and to find meaning in the darkness. He embodies the tension between the desire for public knowledge and the impositions of state secrecy, between the yearning for cosmic connection and the fear of what that connection might reveal. Ingo Swann left us not with answers, but with a mandate to question. He challenged the boundaries of perception, the authority of institutional science, and the official narrative of our lonely place in the universe. Whether we regard him as a visionary, a cautionary tale, or a misunderstood genius, his life compels us to look up at the moon with new eyes, not as a dead rock, but as a symbol of the unknown. It urges us to look inward at the uncharted territories of our own minds. His legacy is the enduring enigma, the persistent whisper that reality is far stranger, more complex, and more interconnected than we have ever dared to believe. The final remote viewing task is now ours. to gaze upon the evidence, the claims, and the man himself, and to discern for ourselves what is true. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I love hearing from you. Check out more videos on the screen, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.